A record amount of money has been spent in the past year on a relentless campaign that came to an end on Tuesday. Well, it came to an end everywhere except Florida, which has decided to capture for their very own the ability to act like they have third world election principles in Florida. In spite of all the parties, the speeches, the celebrations, truth be told, not much has changed after the expenditure of all this money. President Obama remains in the White House. Democrats remain in the majority in the Senate. Republicans retain the majority in the Congress. Here in Missouri, we kept our governor, our senator, and in our district, we kept our congressman. I'm glad it's all over. The divisive and not infrequently dishonest rhetoric of the campaign has actually taxed many friendships, even strained some marriages, and polarized communities in most unhelpful ways. After the horrific events that allowed Hitler to come into power in Germany, they enacted national laws that make it illegal to knowingly lie in any campaign speech or advertisement. While we Americans have often used Nazi Germany as the example of government gone mad, they now look at us in our election process and wonder why we didn't learn anything from all that took place around the rise of fascism and Nazism. Why we still allow the most dishonest of campaign procedures. But in the United States, you can say anything. And our media is now so devoted to being even-handed that they will almost never report on fact-checking, which in fact makes the existence of churches with free pulpits even more important. Churches can do what the media will not do, which is to challenge the untruth of the public conversation around the management of our country. But most churches, as you know, are merely servants of whoever is in power. 250 years ago, Thomas Jefferson said, "In every country and in every age, the priest has been hostile to liberty. He is always in alliance with the despot, abating his abuses in return for the protection of his own." Churches such as ours are vital to our nation, and yet basic civil involvement in the government as the government, by just voting, is still very vital. I raised my daughter to treasure her right to vote. As long as she lived in Missouri, from the time she was 18, I took her even to the most venial of voting opportunities when she would call out from one booth to mine, "Who is it we're supposed to vote for again?" I always get an absentee ballot when I'm going to be away on election day, as I was this past week, but there's something very deceptive about the process of voting, and I want to be very straightforward about that today. You've often heard me quote that 19th century evangelist Alexander Campbell, from whom my very favorite quote is when he said, and he was speaking of prayer, but I think it applies to any time you're expressing your own opinion. He said, "To pray for that for which you will not rise up from prayer and work and sacrifice to accomplish is simply a disappointment to yourself and an insult to God." I think that one of the most deceptive activities among our more conservative and traditional religious friends is their use of the phrase, "I'll pray. I'll pray for you. I'll pray about it. I'll ask God to do something." And I, as you know, I agree with Soren Kierkegaard, who said that prayer does not change the one to whom you pray. It changes the one who prays. Hopefully, it should change the one who prays. But in the exact same way, I think that one of the most self-deceptive traps among progressive thinkers is that we believe we've accomplished something because we have personally arrived at progressive opinions. Having an enlightened opinion about access to health care or education or access to a real job or retirement or housing or even food doesn't mean anything if you don't do anything. Just having an opinion is not an accomplishment. The God to whom the evangelicals appear to be praying, most often to me, looks like just an imaginary Santa Claus in the clouds that grants wishes. But the God many liberals seem to bow to is not much more than their own ego, expressed substantially in the opinions we cherish that exist only between our two ears. How is it anything but hypocrisy if you say that you believe in peace, or you believe in gay rights, or you believe in finding access to health care, if you have never risked anything to accomplish that? If you've never put yourself out on the ledge to take a stand, to give birth to that vision of greater justice or greater compassion. Now, I suspect most of you here and most of you who will be joining us via YouTube and iTunes are outraged at Tea Party politics with all of its anti-women, anti-poor, pro-war, and none too subtle racism. And yet, how exactly does it change anything if you just sit and watch MSNBC every night and repost liberal images on your Facebook page? If you feel like you recognize social injustice and are not doing anything to substantially change it, then you are ipso facto supporting the injustice. As Elie Wiesel said, always take sides, because neutrality always serves the oppressor and never the oppressed. When people say, I just don't want to get involved, or I just want to be neutral, what they are saying is, I am willing to give my allegiance to the most unjust, the most oppressive forces in the world, because as long as you don't get involved, they win. The most difficult decision that our little church has ever faced, we've only existed a little over 4 years, but when we'd only been around for a year, we had the opportunity to buy this building. Now, we started without any denomination's help, without anyone underwriting us, so we started in August of 2008 with absolutely nothing. And a year later, we had almost all of that left. And that's when we discovered this building. And one family put up the down payment, and the rest of us had to look at one another and figure out if all of our big talk about progressive thinking and progressive religion meant anything, or whether we were willing to just let that opportunity slide. And on the day before we bought this building, we could have disbanded this entire church by just giving away a few hymnals and some office furniture, and we could have just gone out of existence the day before we decided to buy it. But we voted. We voted once to make an offer to buy, then we voted again to accept the counter offer, then we voted to borrow the money, and every time we voted, when we were over at the Executive Conference Center, the largest number of votes in the room were not cast. The largest number of votes was just neutrality. But each time we voted to take a step forward with this process, we had a majority vote, but nothing like a consensus. Never got close to a consensus. Now, we're a church that has, from the very beginning, reached out to the poor. Our first act as a church was to raise the money to build a playground for homeless children at the Missouri Hotel. And for obvious reasons, because we have reached out to the marginalized and the poor, we've always had a large portion of our church comprised of people who were barely getting by. So it's no big surprise that from among those who attend our church, that about half do not contribute that we know of at all. What did surprise me was that several of the people who never contributed were outraged by our decision to buy the building. Now, some were sure that it would just ruin our message, that we wouldn't do anything for the poor anymore if we bought a building, that we would lose our focus. And as if to support their predictions, instead of staying and helping us to stay focused on our original mission, they just quit coming. And I don't want to speak critically of people who are not here to defend their honor, but what I'm saying simply is to make the observation that people who do not have skin in the game can be easily deceived into believing that their opinions are of vital importance because they are their opinions. Not because they're going to do anything of substance either way, or risk anything, or sacrifice anything. So what I'm saying should be fairly obvious, that if you want others to take you seriously, then you have to take yourself seriously first. If your opinions are not backed up by you being willing to make any sacrifice to support your opinions, if you have no skin in the game, then how can you blame the rest of us if we don't take you seriously, if you don't take yourself seriously? We're just doing the same thing you're doing. We're ignoring you. There are a whole lot of people who say that they really want to serve God, but only in an advisory capacity. Now, I want to be clear about this. I'm not talking about just money. I am talking about active engagement. We have members of our faith community who are engaged in making this church happen. Most of us here are involved in volunteerism in one way or another in many causes. But still, what it takes to run the church, we have members who cut the grass and get the leaves up. We have members who come in and clean the building. We have members who do the record keeping and transact the business of the church, all of which makes it possible for us to not have to pay for those services. I'm the only full-time employee of this church. We don't have a secretary. We don't have anyone that's doing any of the regular grounds maintenance or even the janitorial services of the church, all of which saves us money. Church members, in almost every case, contribute all the food that we prepare and serve to the homeless at Bill's Place. You volunteer to come and carry out groceries at Crosslines. And people who can't volunteer donate hundreds of dollars a month to buy the food that we carry out at Crosslines. Some of you are tutors at Rare Breed in their literacy program. Some of you are mentors. Some of you visit prisoners. And several of you have served on mission teams with me when we've gone to Nicaragua or for hurricane or tornado relief. I know that many of you who are our internet viewers are pastors. And some of you are social workers and nurses and physicians, and we love hearing from you. We feel connected to you. Many of you are serving in helping professions, and many others of you are volunteers. I'm not wanting in any way to provoke any guilt among our viewers online or among you who are seated here in the sanctuary. But what I am saying is I'm interested in seeing you make the decision to get off the bench and come onto the playing field with the rest of us, to make a decision to sacrifice something, to risk some skin in the game, to find a way to get involved. We don't even do pledge drives in this church. You can't get liberals to commit to what they're going to do next week, let alone next year. We don't do pledge drives. We don't charge for our downloads on YouTube or iTunes. People can view or attend this church for as long as they want to without ever joining, without any commitment, without any donation or any involvement. But let's not ignore the obvious truth. If someone didn't do it, if someone didn't donate, if someone didn't volunteer, then this progressive church would not exist, nor would any other progressive church. This content wouldn't be online if it weren't for people that decided that they would help to support our existence. So you ask yourself, if everyone did exactly what you are doing, would this church exist? Would we still have a presence? Would any progressive church exist? Now, we've had the good fortune of having a couple of donors who have been able to make large contributions, but what I would love to see is for everyone, even if you can't make a very big gift or can't do it very often, if you would just make a small gift, if you would just one day decide to get a one-topping pizza instead of a Supreme and give the church $4 or $5 once a year and put your name on the check, I would love to just know you were casting a vote for us to continue to exist, that you are more than intellectually approving of what we're trying to accomplish, but that you are willing to just get into practice of putting some skin in the game. Now, I think personally, being willing to make contributions to support causes that you believe in, whether it's this church or any other cause that you're involved in, that it takes practice. You learn to sing by singing. You learn to ride a bicycle by riding a bicycle. And if you've always believed that your money is precious and other people's money is not, you've always been willing to let someone else lift the luggage and do the work, it'll always be that way for you until you begin to try to put some skin in the game. And again, really, if it's $5 a week or $5 a year, it's a beginning. One of the most memorable sermons I ever heard, I was just a sophomore in college, and I remember the pastor saying, you think that you have not enough money to live on and you shouldn't contribute. I'm telling you, you need to put $5 in the plate just to say, I'm involved, just to get in practice, so that when you are in a position to make another decision, that you can do more. Giving is a matter of practice. Anyone that's known anything about divorces has seen how people can come to the opinion that my money is precious and your money means nothing. You pay all the bills, you do everything, but what money I have is absolutely precious to me. And those who assume that other people are paying your way or providing the services for you, if you ask them, is it okay with you if I just don't do anything, I'm suspecting they would tell you no. We have some people who sacrifice dearly to make our church exist. Their personal standard of living would be much more comfortable if they were not giving what they give. I doubt that many of them would agree that it's okay if you just let them pay your part of the bills. Money is a fungible way of investing your personal time and energy into a cause. And you have to practice acting on what you believe and not just using everything you have to scratch your own appetitive itches. When Jesus praised the woman in the temple who donated only a couple of small coins, and it was all that she had, it wasn't that what she gave was going to change the future of the temple. It also didn't dramatically affect her personal living, because it wasn't like that two coins would have even bought her an entire meal. She was, however, casting a vote. She was putting skin in the game. She was taking more than an opinion. She was making a statement of faith, a statement of involvement. Jesus clearly didn't think much of wealth. Jesus didn't think much of personal possessions. There are times that money itself seemed almost like a silly idea to him. But fortunately for Jesus, not all of his friends felt the same way. And as critical as we are of some of the traditional institutions of religion, I personally recognize that I have a debt to the religious institutions and individuals that made it possible for me to go to Vanderbilt and to Harvard. Those were church-going denominational people that provided the scholarships and the ability for those institutions to exist and for people like me to get to go there. And where will the next generation of educated leadership come from if we fail to provide the resources for other people to be prepared for ministry, to receive those degrees? We don't charge to attend here. The content of our internet channels is offered at no charge, but none of it is free. In fact, it's quite expensive. It's up to you to decide if it's worth it. In fact, every time you see the donate button on our website or see the offering basket pass through this room, you get to vote on whether we should come back here and do this again another week. Unlike American Idol or in many other ways, the American Congress, your vote here actually matters. We're trying to change the world, and I hope that you will not stand idly by. Amen.
You've been watching a progressive Christian video from the Community Christian Church of Springfield, Missouri. We encourage our viewers to donate to our efforts in feeding the homeless and hungry of our community. Write to us at reverenddray@aol.com for more information.